So one of the coolest things that the Pokemon Company has done, in my opinion, is when they revisit another legendary group and they kind of add on to it, right? Like when they added Regigigas to the Regis and then later on added Regidrago and Regieleki to them. Or even when they added Enamorus to the Kami Trio, now Quartet, in Legends Arceus. And I think they'll be doing this again. Welcome back to the Lumiose Post, where we talk about all things Pokemon, and today we're going to be talking about how I believe that a 5th Tapu may be coming in Legends EA. Stick around for this one. Seriously, give this one a chance, because I really think there's some decent amount of evidence here. So, first, let's talk a little bit about this idea of adding legendaries to these groups. So we saw this with Legends Arceus, which does mean that the Legends team, did this before, so it kind of, in my opinion, makes it a little more likely they'd do it again. But also, interestingly enough, Kalos doesn't have many legendaries. The only legendaries in Gen 6 were the Yveltal, Xerneas, and Zygarde trio. There was nothing else. They added Mewtwo into the Kalos decks, as well as the Cantonian birds, to kind of give it some legendaries, but there were no Kalos legendaries that had like their own story in the Kalos region, which was very upsetting. And that's one thing that I think adding in these Tapus and giving them an additional member of the line will do for this region. It'll give it a little more life and make it feel like these are a part of that region in a way, in the same way that it felt like the Kami Quartet were a part of the Hisui region. Now, there's a lot of reasons that I would say the Tapus are a likely candidate. So first off, there is the fact that our first hint at the Tapus were in X and Y. We could get the strange souvenir from a guy in a hotel in X and Y, and this was a hint to the Tapus and Alola. He even talked about how it's a souvenir from another region. You can buy the strange souvenir in the Alola region, so it was a hint at the Tapu. So you've already got kind of a connection to the Tapus and Kalos, at least, like, in lore there's a connection in the games to these two regions. So that's a great starting point. But then also there's a lot more. There's a lot to the Tapus and kind of how they work that ties into the Kalos region really well. So the Tapus are protectors of the environment and the ecosystem. They, in fact, even get a signature move, all 4 of them, called Nature's Madness. Well, I don't know if you know this, but Zygarde is also very heavily tied to ecosystem and the environment. In fact, he only comes out and only appears and does his little Zygarde magic when there is some kind of threat to the environment or the ecosystem of the world. This is even likely why Zygarde is so heavily featured in the Alola region, because if you don't remember that, that is where you had to collect the different Zygarde cells and cores and could build your own Zygarde, and this was the first game to give us access to 10% Zygarde as well as the complete form of Zygarde. Likely, Zygarde was here in the Alola region because of the same crisis that the Tapus were trying to stop, and that was the Ultra Beast invasion that was kind of impending over Alola, looming over Alola. So maybe now we see that there actually is a connection between Zygarde and the Tapus, with the Tapus now coming over to Zygarde's home place in the Kalos region to help fight off some threat there. Another little similarity between Zygarde and the Tapus is that they're all terrain-based. All of the Tapus are terrain-based in their abilities. Each one of them gets an ability. Tapu Koko gets an ability that sets up electric terrain. Tapu Lele sets up psychic terrain. Tapu Fini sets up the fairy terrain, misty terrain. And Tapu Bulu sets up grassy terrain. While Zygarde does not set up a terrain, Zygarde is literally terrain. It is a ground-type Pokemon. So it is terrain. It just is it itself. So there's your connection there. You also could make the argument that, like Zygarde, the Tapus have a complete form. We know about Zygarde's complete form. This is something that it can access with the power construct ability. And the Tapus have this alternate form where it's this giant glowing man wearing the Tapu as a head, and it uses this in its Z move. So you can, again, kind of make a connection there by saying they do both have these complete forms they can access. But there's actually more than just the similarities between these Pokemon and even the lore of these Pokemon that makes me think the Tapus could appear over in the Kalos region in Legends EA. There's the fact that I think Pokemon has already hinted at this. So for a brief backstory here, the Pokemon Company, we do know, loves to hint at things going forwards. The Urshifu being a single strike and rapid strike Urshifus, those were very clearly a hint to the rapid or the agile and strong styles that were going to come in Legends Arceus, the two different battle styles. You could also say that there's, actual literal posters of Gigantamax Toxtricity in the Alola region. We literally just talked about how the Strange Souvenir is an item given to you in Kalos and as a hint at the Alola region. So it makes sense that Pokemon would like to do this. And there's one character in Scarlet and Violet that I think is kind of hinting at a 5th Tapu, and that is Rhyhorn. So Rhyhorn, really cool design, she's beloved by the community, but Rhyhorn has a lot of Alolan elements to her design. So she has a bracelet of Tapu Koko, she has a belt buckle of Lunala, she has a Marshadow hairpiece, her clothing kind of invokes Paniola Town vibes, and then she has an Articuno on her chest. Like, on her necklace, there's like a little Articuno. Well, Articuno is not an Alolan Mon. You cannot find Articuno in Alola. While you can get Articuno in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, it's through the Ultra Wormhole, so technically not even in Alola. So Articuno's definitely the odd one here. Well, I would say that maybe her necklace is not hinting at Articuno, but just a generic bird design, because the new Tapu will be a bird-based Pokemon. So each of the Tapus represent a Pokemon. Tapu Koko is a rooster, Tapu Lele is a butterfly or a snail. I've kind of heard both. Tapu Bulu is a bull, and Tapu Fini is a dolphin or a swordfish. Again, kind of heard both, but clearly they all are kind of supposed to be representative of animals. Now, while Tapu Koko is a rooster, which is, for those who didn't know, a bird, I think that this Tapu will be, given what the necklace looks like, more of a bird capable of flight, because roosters really aren't that great at flying and are mostly seen, just walking around. They kind of fly a little off the ground, they're not like soaring through the air, while I think this Tapu actually will be. So there actually is a Hawaiian hawk. I could see this Tapu taking inspiration from that and being like a Hawaiian hawk Tapu. That would be really neat. As for a terrain, we could see it set up some kind of terrain that deals with winds. I think about how Mega Rayquaza has the ability Delta Stream, and it's like a tailwind and also boosts flying moves and all this stuff. I could see that kind of being reworked, maybe nerfed a little bit, and then made into a terrain, and they just change Mega Rayquaza's ability to set this up, as well as this new Tapu will also be able to just automatically set this up with its ability. I think that the terrains are really cool. They're really fun to use in battles. We see like Psy-Spam teams are really popular, and of course with the Paradox Pokemon, setting up electric terrain can boost the future Paradox Pokemon. So I think terrain is such a fun thing in Pokemon and a fun thing in battles, and I think it makes sense that they would want to expand on this going forward, just like how they kind of expand on weather going forward by adding like the fog in Gen 4. This could also in turn be a setup for a future Alola Legends game, or just an Alola game, but I'd imagine an Alolan Legends game, where maybe there is a 5th island. Each of the Tapus is a protector of an island, so if there is a 5th Tapu, I would say that there's another Alolan island that this Tapu is kind of the protector of. This makes sense. Hawaii, in the real world, which is where Alola is based off of, has over 9 different islands, and we only got to see 5 of them in the actual games, and yeah, so there's plenty of more islands, and that's only talking about Hawaii. That's not even including the fact that if GameFreak wanted to, whether we think it's a good idea or not, they could explore other Polynesian islands in an Alolan Legends game, or even in an Alolan remake or sequel game, or whatever it may be. Now, for the record, I'm not saying that I think this Alolan Legends game would come out next year or the year after or something like that. I think it would be like minimum 4 years down the line, but either way, I think it could just be them laying down groundwork for a future Alola Legends game. Now we've got to look at the actual games themselves, and coding of games. There's some, in my opinion, pretty good evidence for the Tapu showing up in these games, and that is that they weren't in Scarlet and Violet. There are a lot of legendary Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet, but noticeably the ones that were absent were the Gen 6 legendaries, the Tapus, the Ultra Beasts, and also Silvally and Type Null, which kind of tie heavily to the Ultra Beasts, given that they were designed to kill Ultra Beasts. Now, this is important because we know that, well, the reason the Gen 6 legendaries weren't in these games is because they're getting games focused on them. So, it kind of just makes a little more sense to me that the Tapus were also sat out because they will be allowed to be brought in into the Legends ZA game and will be a part of that story. And that's where we get into why the Tapus are here in Alola. What is going on that causes the Tapus to have to show up in the Kalos region? I just said Alola, I mean Kalos. Sorry about that. But this obviously is going to feature some kind of environmental or ecosystem crisis. The game is going to focus on Zygarde, hence the Z and Legend ZA. So, since there's an environmental and ecosystem crisis, it makes sense that the Tapus could show up too. Like I said earlier, both the Tapus and Zygarde deal with those kinds of things. So, I think that specifically one of these ecosystem crisis or environmental crisis, or perhaps a result of whatever this crisis is in Legends EA, could be the return of Ultra Beasts. And so we have the Tapus there to kind of fight off these Ultra Beasts. Again, the Ultra Beasts are also missing from Scarlet and Violet, like the Tapus, as is Sylvaline Type Null, a Pokemon very heavily connected to the Ultra Beasts. So it just all makes sense to me. And if we look at real-world geography, then actually Kalos is really close to an Ultra Wormhole. We know that an Ultra Wormhole tends to open up inside the Crown Tundra in the Galar region, and if we're looking at real-world geography, the Galar region is the UK, and Kalos is France, which means there's only a ocean channel separating the Kalos region from the Galar region. So, just across the water over there is an Ultra Wormhole. Now, of course, this is all speculation, but I really think all of this adds up to not only create a really cool story, but create some compelling evidence for the Tapus showing up in this game, and I do really think that if they show up, they will do what they did for the Kami Trio and add another member, and the Tapu Quartet will now become the Tapu... what would that be? Quintuples? I don't know. Tell me in the comments. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. Let me know what you think on this theory in the comments below. All that fun stuff. And until next time, I will see all of you later.